Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch. Now, we didn't have a Market Watch last week due to all the conspiracy news and releases, so a little bit's changed in the market since we looked at it last. You will notice, though, with some notable exceptions, the market is relatively slow right now. I think part of that is due to the fact that attention is turning to conspiracy, and a lot of players are just going to play conspiracy this week and have fun drafting. Aside from that, we're also getting close again to another big shakeup in Standard, so that's going to keep Standard cards a little bit quiet over the next few weeks as we approach closer to the big rotation and, of course, Kaladesh coming out. So, having said that, let's talk about Standard first. We're going to look at the top 5 cards that lost value this week. Coming in at number 5 is Spell Queller, down 71 cents to $9.57. Not a huge drop here. This is a card that's still seeing play, but you do have to take into account it is a rare, and a lot of packs of Eldritch Moon have been opened recently, and it is a small set, so there's going to be more copies of this floating around than there were even a couple weeks ago. Next we have Nahiri the Harbinger. She's down 77 cents to $19.99. Very small fluctuation there. Coming number 3 is Gisela the Broken Blade, down $1.13 to $11.28. I mean, she's been dropping pretty steadily since the release of the set. And again, there was a lot of speculation during pre-release that this would be a really big card because at the time the metagame was really formed around the aggressive decks. When Eldritch Moon came out, that all changed, and what we saw are the Delirium decks really rise to prominence, a lot of control decks, and less of the aggressive decks. So due to the fact that this was expected to see a lot more play, it had a very high pre-release price tag, and it's just been simply dropping since that time. Coming in number 2 is Tameo Field Researcher, down $1.13 to $12.29. I mean, again, not a huge drop this week, but this is a card that is still seeing play out of sideboards. It's just not a card you necessarily need 4 of, and because of that, it's just regulating and finding its price value probably between the $10, $14 mark overall. Finally, coming in at number 1 is Emrakul the Promised End, down $1.47 to $21.87. Now, this saw a huge spike after the Pro Tour. It just got so much attention at the Pro Tour. It's a great card, but again, it's not a card you necessarily want 4 of in your deck. So once players were able to acquire their copies for the Standard season, this started to go down, and here we are seeing it closer to $20. I think that's more of a fair price for the card. Alright, let's look at the top 5 cards that have gained value this week. Coming in at number 5 is Grasp of Darkness, only up 14 cents to 83 cents, but this is an interesting indication of the strength that this card actually has right now in Standard. It's one of the go-to removal cards, and you're seeing it played in not only the Delirium decks, but also the Control decks, showing up in a lot of places. Coming in number 4 is Prized Amalgam, up 22 cents to $4.45. Again, not a huge increase here, but this is a card that's actually seeing a lot of play in a lot of different places. Now, it is seeing some Standard play, as you could probably imagine, but where this card has really shined is the Dredge decks. Modern Dredge has been really popular recently, and this is run in the Modern Dredge deck. As a matter of fact, I've even seen this show up in Legacy and Vintage Dredge builds. Now, we'll see if that sticks long term, but right now players are at least trying it out in those formats, which could lead to some very interesting implications long term. So this might not be a bad investment for $4 or $5. Just pick up a play set of these. You never know. Long term, this could actually be a very viable card. Coming in number 3 is Collected Brutality, up 32 cents to $1.72. Again, not a huge increase, but a card that has been seeing a fair amount of Standard play. Number 2 is Fevered Visions, up 34 cents to $2.04. Again, not very strong, but there is a Thermo Izzet deck that has been actually pretty popular since the Pro Tour. It's a deck that's risen into prominence a little more over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it's been doing pretty well. This card's a part of that deck. Finally, coming in at number 1, probably no surprise, Liliana the Last Hope, up $1.02 to $44.99. Again, not a huge increase with her, but it is the biggest increase of the week. Seeing play all over the place, obviously. You see her all the time in Standard. The Delirium decks, the Control decks are all running her. She has even seen a little bit of Modern and Legacy play. Again, too early to tell if that's going to stick, but there are players trying to put this in those decks to see how they run. So keep an eye on her. She could potentially be another long-term value card. All right, let's look at Modern. And again, Modern is a little bit slower this week with at least one big exception. But let's look at the cards that lost value first. Coming in number 5 is Counterbalance, down $1.14 to $24.15. This is a Modern legal card, of course, which is why we're talking about it here. But some of the price changes is more due to Legacy, the key part of the Legacy Miracle deck, of course. And a few months back, a lot of players thought either this or Sensei's Divining Top were going to be banned in Legacy. When they weren't, this card really started to spike. Now it's just stabilizing. So I think this is more of a $20 to $22 card. I don't think it's going to go below $20 though. Alright, you know it's a slow week when you have a basic land on your countdown. And this is a Plains from Shards of Alara, down $1.37 to 40 cents. But I thought this was interesting to include because you probably want to ask yourself, well, how does this happen? Well, first off, this will usually occur with basic lands that have aesthetically pleasing art, for lack of a better word. I mean, the art on this actually is pretty cool. It's not something you normally see on a Plains card. It's chippy art, very popular artist, very popular piece of art. So probably at some point, one or maybe 2 or 3 players just thought this is really cool all at the same time and went out and tried to purchase a bunch of copies for their decks, maybe for their commander decks or just whichever decks they wanted to run. And because of that, it caused a small spike in this particular land. It's now coming down as places are just restocking. So it's just a weird anomaly, but I thought it was worth pointing out. Number 3 is Greater Gargadon. This is down $2.72 to $10.68, and this is the Time Spiral version. This is a big part of that Modern Dredge deck that's been very popular, but you are going to notice some of these Dredge components are going to start coming down now for a couple of reasons. One, the players that have been trying to pick them up frantically over the last month have got their decks together now. So the spike was caused due to the fact there was high demand while folks built their decks. Now there's less of that. It's going to start to come down. Secondly, a lot of players are now figuring out how to sideboard to defeat this deck. So there are a few players that are going to jump off this train and try to move on to the next thing in the meta. Coming in number 2 is Brushland, 10th edition version, down $3.04 to $12.99. This has been dropping pretty steadily. I've talked about this the last few weeks, but the thing that's awkward about this card is, first off, yes, it was popular due to the fact that the Eldrazi Bant deck did very well in Modern and is still a very strong force, and this is a key component to its mana base. But where this got weird was, I think once players started picking up this card, some collectors started jumping on the train too, and this saw a really unnatural spike. Now this is the most popular version of Brushland because aesthetically, again, it's probably the best looking one. However, what's strange is the Ice Age version, which maybe doesn't look as nice, but it's still the original version you can get for just a couple dollars. And as long as that's an option out there, a lot of players are going to just be very happy picking up an original for a couple dollars. A lot of collectors even would prefer the original because of its history and its rarity. And when you have an option like that out there, this can't possibly stay where it is, and that's what we're seeing now. We're going to continue to see this drop, I have no doubt. Bridge from Below is number 1 this week. Modern Masters version going down $2.51 to $17.10, where the Future Sight went down $3.50 to $15.49. And this is another Modern Dredge card. It has spiked pretty strongly over the last few weeks, and now players have their copies. It's starting to stabilize. Alright, let's look at the Modern cards that have gained value. Coming in at number 5 is Ancestral Visions Time Spiral version, up $1.63 to $53.31. This card has seen some steady play since it was unbanned. I don't think that's going to change. This is one of those cards that's going to slowly creep up, and before you know it, it will be even more expensive until at least it sees another reprint. Coming in number 4 is Modern Masters 2015 Tarmogoyf, up $1.94 to $134.95. Now, Tarmogoyfs in general have been dropping over the last couple months, but I think this one, being the cheapest one, has gotten to the point where it was so cheap, I'm sure some players thought it might be time to just pick up some copies so they have them for decks, and that's probably what you're seeing here. This is definitely players picking this up and not collectors. Collectors shy away from the Modern Masters 2015 version typically. Coming in number 4 is Noble Hierarch, and the Modern Masters version from 2015 going up $2.37 to $54.99, where Conflux has gone up $3.20 to $56.10. Another card that's just a huge Modern staple is just going to continue to creep up until it sees another reprint. Even if you reprint this thing every 2 years in a Modern Masters, it's still going to retain and gain value. Coming in number 2, Spring Jack Shepherd, up 278 to 344. This is actually a Commander favorite, so it's kind of cool to see a big Commander card on here. And finally, coming in at number 1, the big card of the week, Modern Masters version of Engineered Explosives, up $13.86 to $40, where the 5th Dan version is up $23.23 to $49. So what happened here with this card? I don't think it's a quote-unquote buyout or anything like that. I think that this was a card that, first off, was very undervalued. It was a card that saw a fair amount of play out of sideboards in a lot of different places, and it was still not super expensive considering the amount of play it was seeing. On top of that, there's been some really strong decks to appear in Modern the last few months. You see the Dredge deck, you see things like the Eldrazi deck. This is a way that players have found to answer at least some of the threats in some of those decks, and they're moving this into their sideboards more and more. This is a card that can be run in any sideboard, and you can put a number of copies in your sideboard and actually deal with a lot of different threats. So I think this card is going up mostly because of the fact that it was undervalued and has very strong playability. Having said that, I'm sure as it started to rise, some collectors jumped on and started grabbing copies, which is going to continue to inflate the price a little bit. But I don't think this is an actual quote-unquote full-on buyout or anything like that. But it is a pretty big increase, and overall, in the long run, the card will eventually start to go down, but it's not going to go down probably nearly as close to where it was before this card started to spike. Alright, let's move on to Legacy. We're going to look at the cards that lost value this week. Got some interesting ones. There's actually a couple that are non-reserve list cards. Imagine that. Coming in at number 5 is Elephant Graveyard, down $8.32 to $40.50. This is one of those cards that, you know what, it's an older card, it's rare, it's hard to find. Collectors probably have been picking up copies of this because so many of the old cards are going up in value, especially from Arabian Nights. But this one's a little bit awkward just simply because there's not a whole lot of people playing this card. So you can collect it, collectors will want it, but players aren't really enthused about it, which is going to keep the price relatively stable. Coming in number 4 is Tetravus. This is a non-reserve list card. Imagine that. Down $8.38 to $12.25. This saw a really weird spike a few weeks back. I do think it was probably a buyout more than anything, and it's just been dropping ever since. Coming in number 3 is Jazam Djinn, down $26.55 to $539.10. This card has been kind of wildly fluctuating, but it has stayed between the $500 and $600 mark. I think that's where it's going to sit. I think Old School maybe brought some attention to this card because a lot of decks want to run 4 of these. The Suicide Black decks will run these. So it has garnered maybe a little bit of spotlight because of that, but at the same time, it's a very iconic Magic card with iconic art, and it's old and it's rare, so expect it to stick around this price point. Next we have City of Brass, Arabian Nights version, of course, down $31.69 to $90.25. This is another card that's not on the reserve list. It also saw a pretty big spike recently, but players do have other options. You can get newer versions of this card that, granted, might not be as rare or as aesthetically pleasing at times, but you can get them for just a few dollars because of that. Collectors still want this card. Players maybe don't feel as they need it as strongly. Coming in number 1, the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale, down $112.32 to $1,217.85. Actually, for a card this expensive, this is just kind of normal stabilization. Nothing too big going on or too different with this card this week. Alright, let's look at the cards that have gained value this week. There's one notable potential buyout to look at, but let's see what's going on. At number 5, we have Unlimited Plateau, up $7.78 to $167.48. Number 4 is Friday Night Magic version of Bloodbraid Elf, up $8.09 to $18. This is a card that probably some collectors have just been picking up. There's not a whole lot of these at any given time on the market, so I think you're just seeing a small spike here. Number 3, Underground Sea, and this is the unlimited version, up $29.43 to $5.98. Number 2 is Moat, up $40.15 to $618.26. This was recently the victim of a buyout. It saw a huge increase, really started to come down, but now here it is going up again. So I think this card is trying to find its value in the post-buyout world. And coming in number 1, probably the big news of the week in Legacy, Volcanic Island Unlimited version, up $101.89 to $567.50. Now, even as of just another day ago, this was up another $100, so it's already starting to come down. But this definitely feels like at least a mini buyout. Someone's trying to manipulate the market, grab some copies of this card. Now, typically buyouts of cards that are this expensive, folks will have to buy these out on credit. They don't have the capital to do this in cash. So when they do this, they'll have to flip them quickly so they don't end up making a big interest payment. So you're going to see some changes in this card probably very quickly. It looks like it's already starting to come down. So as these get sold back to the market, they will come down. However, they probably won't go back down to where they were prior to the buyout. But having said that, that's the market watch for this week. So the next few weeks are going to be very interesting. As Standard gets closer to rotating out, you're going to see some potential deals on some Standard cards that will be leaving the environment. Watch out for cards like Jace Vryn's Prodigy or Collected Company, for example, for cards you might be able to get a deal on that will still be playable in Modern down the line in the future. And then we'll also start to see some speculation on cards, I'm sure, as Kaladesh cards start to get revealed more and more. And as a matter of fact, next Friday, we'll start to get more information on Kaladesh. And I have no doubt that some folks are going to gravitate towards some artifact or artifact-friendly cards that are in both Standard and Modern, so you may want to watch out for those too. So having said that, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks as always for watching. This video, like all my videos, was made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Even a donation of $1 helps me to keep growing this community and creating better quality content for all of you. Check out our Patreon page for exclusive giveaways and future goals for the channel. If you haven't yet had a chance to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, product openings, or finance videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.